Jerry, thank you so much for your opening statements. Farhan, you now have your opening statements. So I'll leave the floor for you.
Great, thanks. Jerry, I can't believe you said governments as a good example of hierarchy. I think you're just walking right into a trap there. We all know governments are not actually designed to get many things done in an effective manner. So I think maybe you're giving me some points there. So the reason I really admire the flat structure is actually because what you're seeing is you don't want to have a big distance between the CEO and individual contributor. I've definitely been in many situations whereby you've got a management chain that has a broken telephone effect, and in many companies that ends up diluting the information that goes back to the CEO. I remember this at a large company I worked at about 10 years ago, where we would have red light, green light, yellow light on our slides showing how things were going. And red lights would turn to yellow lights as it went up the chain and would eventually be green lights when it got to the CEO. And so I think there's information loss there. When you look at really effective leaders, you'll find that they tend to cut through any sort of hierarchy that's in place anyway. So if you look at like a Warren Buffett, who has 250 direct reports, actually, because he sets individual compensation for all of those CEOs, and there is no hierarchy in between. Myself, when I was running a startup called Extreme Labs, I had 120 direct reports. It was actually quite manageable. And the reason for that is people tend to fall back on the management techniques and they just use it as like a checklist. So for example, maybe people have read somewhere you should have one manager for 10 direct reports, 5 managers to a director. So they just blindly implement these things without understanding what they're trying to implement. And I think that's the downside to a hierarchy, is that it just tends to be set at in some place in the company as a standard, and then everybody rolls it out. Whereas it should be different for different teams and can be much, much flatter. I remember you came from Google. I know Google had a few experiments around having 30 or 50 direct reports to a manager as an experiment to see, could we get more done? There's actually a great line one of my friends from McKinsey says, which is, managers create work for each other. So when you have managers and they create work for other managers, that's not real work. Customers are not seeing that impact. And actually all it is just sucking up the air in the room. And we know that there's no way to actually figure out what part of that work is effective, because smart folks will just do work, right, for 40 hours a week, and you'll never know if that's actually manageable. So what I would say is there's actually ways to create a flat structure, have shortened the distance of communication to the CEO, and have people really enjoy their work life. I know that at Extreme Labs, many of my former employees come back and say that they wish they could find that type of environment again, because they were able to get so much done without any managers in between.